All right, folks, positive poll here on Saturday, November 30th, 2019, 11:30 a.m. I want to try to brush up on some details concerning that last Montauk project video as it related to Al Bielek. And, I had read a transcript of a MUFON conference that he attended back in 1990. And as luck will have it, I was able to find the transcript again online because I'd lost it. So I failed miserably trying to dredge my memory as it related to the question answer session at the end of this conference. So this is one of Al's, his first speaking engagements, not the first one, but he shows up in Dallas, Texas for a MUFON conference on January 13th, 1990. And, as I stated, the people that attended this conference, a lot of them didn't buy into Al's story. And during this question answer session, they grilled Al. They had some awesome questions. So I'm going to try to go over some of the main ones. The transcript's 29 pages, so it's impossible to try to go over it. But the reason why this particular, conference that Al spoke at is important is because he shares the details concerning the people that had made the movie, The Philadelphia Experiment, and how they obtained information concerning what became the basis of this movie. And, I'm going to start off with that, and then we could move over to the question answer session. So, at some point, Al attends a psychotronic convention in New York City. This would have been around February of '89. Preston Nichols was one of the speakers. Al met up with him. We know by that time Al had been recovering his memories concerning the Philadelphia experiment, and he began to speak about that. So at this particular conference, there is representatives from this EMI Thorn Industries group that were involved in the making of the Philadelphia experiment, and they noticed Preston there. Now, again, the backstory of this is EMI originally was a scientific instrument corporation in London, England during the mid 1800s. At some point, these two brothers, the Wilson brothers, take over the corporation, and it's the year 1890. And they are with these two people. Okay, there's four of them. And as I stated, one of the persons was Aleister Crowley. So Crowley says that the other person is a man from the future, but they're not really sure who he is, but he is able to share the details concerning this Philadelphia experiment. Now, at one point, they take a picture of the four people, the two Wilson brothers, Aleister Crowley, and what would later be known to be Preston Nichols, the man from the future. Now, Al, he explains this at this Dallas MUFON conference on January 13th, 1990. So, essentially, the story becomes that as time progresses, EMI has this story concerning the Philadelphia experiment. They have this picture, and they had set out to discover who that fourth person was in the picture. Now, it would take nearly 90 years later for these representatives that were archivists, and they just so happened to show up at this psychotronic conference, and they believe that, hey, they found their guy, Preston. So it would be months after this conference. They go visit Preston at his house in upstate New York, and they say, "Hey, look, we've been looking for you. We have something we want to show you." They begin to explain about the Philadelphia experiment, and they explain that they have this picture as it relates to Aleister Crowley, but the man in the picture, they they say that this is you telling Preston, hey, you know, we were told by this Crowley character that this person is a man that's from the future. Now, folks, I mean, the minute you hear Aleister Crowley, you got to start, scratching your head. So, nonetheless, Preston gets wind of all this information. Now, the one thing I cannot find out is what Preston's reaction was to all this. So this is all separate from everything that Bielik talked about, and and Swerdlow. I don't think he's that. He'll never even. Like I said, he separates himself from the other three. But the one thing is, Al shares this at the Dallas conference concerning, how the movie, how did they get the information from the movie? And this becomes one of the first questions in the question answer session, because these people are smart that are in this audience, and they want to know, well, hey, look, you're just now coming to terms with this Philadelphia experiment, and you're right in the middle of all this, but yet there's this movie made, and where did these people obtain this information? And so that's one of the first questions, and his answer becomes the story about how this EMI group had been with Aleister Crowley and the man of the future, which was Preston Nichols, and this whole story of what was going on with the Philadelphia experiment was shared way back then. So, you gotta, this is what has been told. I don't really hear, much of this story. It seems like, the people that have, talked about this Montauk project, they don't seem to, come across this information. So, here, the thing of it is, anybody can get this transcript. I just got it online a couple days ago. It's a Dallas, Texas MUFON conference, January 13th, 1990. So here's the important thing. I want to, get into that whole part, but with the question answer session that these people grilled Al, and a lot of them stumped him, which is generally Al, his story stays the same. And it's very rare that you see him, for a lack of words. So let's look at some of these questions. All right, and folks, look, this, if you're claiming to be a target, and what I will tell you, people out there in the great land that was once called America, and you claim to be a targeted individual, all this stuff is important concerning MK Ultra, Montauk Project, all that. I clearly see people on YouTube that were MK Ultra and they don't realize it. Some of them seem to be sellouts, all right? And others are just clueless to the fact that they could have been MK Ultra. So, it's important. Whether you realize it or not, the whole mind control issue, everything is important as it relates to the Montauk Project and MK Ultra. So look, you have this lady. She's one of the first questions after the whole, thing with EMI. She says, I have two questions. One of them has to deal with your traveling into the future and seeing the doctor that was in charge of the Phoenix experiment. Now, we know the Phoenix experiment is the Montauk Project. That's one aspect of Montauk. So she says, look, The doctor that was in charge of Phoenix experiment was there, and it's also the same one that was in charge of the Philadelphia experiment. You knew that you had gone and then you went back. You knew you were in the future, but at the time the doctor did not know. Is that correct? So essentially we know that, all right, they're working on invisibility techniques. They create the electromagnetic bottle around the destroyer, their Eldritch. Apparently they had, pulsed this EMF field at very high power. And this is where the part where they stumble upon this. They're able to, punch a hole in hyperspace somehow, which creates this time loop. But during this whole process, you have what was then Ed Cameron, aka Al Bielek, and his brother Duncan. They jump off the ship. Next thing you know, they're in, August 12th, 1983, out in Long Island, New York, at Montauk. They get scooped up. They're brought down into the complex, and there they see this, Dr. John Van Neumann. All right. So, the lady's like saying, like, hey, look, you knew that, something happened, but what about the doctor? Okay. Because look, they're saying that, this time loop goes from the August 12th, 43 with the Philadelphia experiment, and it connects with the Montauk Project, August 12th, 1983. So he says, here's his answer. No, he knew, he in 83 knew where he was, meaning von Neumann, which that's a confusing answer. But she further goes, okay, well, yeah, but in 43, he didn't. He couldn't have known what he would have been doing in 1983. So here's how Al answers this. No, he did not know a thing about it at the time. I eventually told him what was going on, and that's why he eventually wrote a report, because he became cognizant of the facts. So what you have to imagine, folks, is like I just said, they get scooped up. They see this older John Van Neumann, and, they tell him, hey, look, we're from the past. We were in the Philadelphia harbor on this destroyer, and we were experimenting with invisibility technology. And, we just left you in 1943. So essentially, Al, he gets questioned again. Okay, well, when were these reports written? In 43 or 83? Al answers, in 1943, there was a series of reports written. And he knew the facts as to what had gone wrong in the coupling to the future. Which right there, it's making it sound that they were trying to do this, when in actuality, they stumbled upon it. So you have to imagine, okay, now we know, if this is, folks, this is why, these videos go sideways quick, all right, because it gets confusing. You have to understand that Ed Cameron gets sent back to 1943, all right, after they show up on Montauk Point. And there's some other things that happen in between there, but he gets sent back, and he's telling von Neumann back at the Philadelphia harbor that, hey, look, I just left you in 1983. You were out in Montauk Point. So apparently, von Neumann didn't believe him at first, but the question is, but that's where I was curious. If you had told him that you'd seen him in the future, and pretty much, and Al jumps in, he didn't believe it. He most certainly did not believe it at first, but he came to believe it. She says, what, just by your persuasion? And Al says, well, not entirely due to that. There was other elements. So this goes to the heart of the matter of this time travel, folks. All right? And to try to not make things more confusing concerning this, all right, you have this whole issue of these super soldiers out there in the secret space program. They're doing these 20 and back programs, which, again, I am telling you people that you give them too much credit. I highly doubt they can just do whatever they want. And here's the reason why. And this is the explanation that Bielek talks about concerning the time travel. is as just as every human has a biofield that, we emit our own energy, we create our own electrical fields, our own EMF fields, it's our genetic makeup, so does planet Earth. And apparently, it was discovered every 20 years, this biofield of Earth peaks out, meaning it's at a peak resonance. And for some reason, and this is what they stumbled upon, and this other people ask these questions. I can't go through the whole thing, but just by the mere fact, I don't think they had this information in 43, and that's why it was an accident when they created that EMF field, that they were able to punch the hole in hyperspace and bend the space-time continuum and do what happened. So what they're saying now is, though, that look, they can do this stuff at the snap of a finger. But you have to remember, folks, all right, what if you know this story, when Al and Duncan originally jumped off the ship, they first end up in a hospital with, radiation burns. They're all banged up. And they're at another further date, which is where Al describes the chaos that took place on Earth, meaning the event, whether it's a meteor hit or just the tribulations in full swing, whatever it was, an event took place where changes had occurred on planet Earth, and everything was completely shut down in such a manner that the only authority left was the military industrial complex. That's the way Al explains it. So, this lady has her second question. All right. And look, folks, if you're getting confused, like I said, hey, this spider web is so impossible to unravel, but you have to remember, 4 people go on to live to tell the story. And then after that, you have people that, are curiosity seekers of interest, this and that, and they start delving into it. But look at this second question from this lady. Okay. Now, here's what Al just spoke about, how when he was Ed Cameron and his brother Duncan, right before Pearl Harbor, they were in San Francisco and they were supposed to go to Hawaii. They're told by an officer to stay put. You two don't go anywhere. So the lady says, well, okay, the second question has to do with the comments that were made about Pearl Harbor, saying that within a short time we're going to war. So the officer tells these two, stay put, because we are about to go to war with Japan and Pearl Harbor is going to be bombed. So the lady says, well, look, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but we thought Pearl Harbor was a big surprise, right? Here's how Al answers. I'm sorry, ma'am, it was no surprise to the administration. They set the whole thing up to get the Japanese to bomb us and get us into the war. Now, look, I'm going to stop there with that one, because that's pretty much, we know that to be the case, all right? So I want to try to get into some of these other couple more questions, because it's important, because when Al's speaking at this particular conference, all right, his memories are fresh, and he's a younger man. So, as you listen to some of his talks going into the 2000s, it's clearly age has gotten hold of him. But let's see if we can get another good question. Okay, here we go. This is very interesting. A man says, you said that in 1943, you went to 1983 and then back to 43. And when you came to with your memory in 88, it would show that this particular dimension, you were possibly somewhere else in 83. Do you know what I'm saying? So here's how Al answers it, which is, this question is an awesome question. True, in 1983, I was Al Bielek working in LA, California, far removed from the East Coast. So you got to imagine, Ed Cameron's the one that jumped off the Eldritch and ended up at Montauk with his brother. So the guy says, okay, well, so is the universe laid out like a hologram where you can go different places in time, or is this just another, and it looks like they couldn't transcribe that last part, but Al says you got into some very complex problems here in terms of time. So how do you reconcile that, folks? All right, Al Bielek is supposed to be in 1983 the electrical engineer working out in Los Angeles, California, but Ed Cameron is the one that is at Montauk Point. Now, if you're completely confused at this point, again, I would suggest you go watch some of these phony TIs, all right, that are leading you down blind alleys. So let's go look at another question, folks. All right, let's see. Okay, here we go. Yes, I have a couple questions. The first one, something about the August 12th date, why I understand it after listening to you. It was pure coincidence that the disastrous experiment occurred on August 12th. And the second coincidence is the Phoenix link up in hyperspace to create the time loop. So, Al, he tries to go into this explanation, and essentially he explains about the biofields as it relates to the peak cycles every 20 years. And these are these opportunities that when these events occur, which I assume the next one's going to be August 12th, 2023. But he explains about that, and I don't want to get into it because it's a long-winded answer. But again, these dates that are in question. So it looks like, let's see. So a lot of this, like I said, with these conferences that Al attends, his story never changes. He is the one person concerning this whole thing, and again, he was mind controlled like the rest of us. So recovering these memories, it seems to me that why did these four people, or let's just say Al, Preston, and Stewart, be able to remember so much concerning this, but yet these Montauk boys are nowhere to be found. You saw there was a gentleman by the name of John Quinn who believes he was part of this. He did very, very detailed analysis over 20 years ago concerning Montauk. I have yet to really. Here's the thing, folks. Like I said, as this relates to me, all right, you have to be in my age group to be a part of these original experiments. Now, again, I got moved to New Jersey in 1979, right? Thanksgiving. I just turned, would have been 13 years old. So the first setup that they did on me